I'm someone who loves a good old-fashioned miniature painting and hobby showcase, and during my time I've judged a lot of mostly Games Workshop official competitions, like the ones held at various Warhammer World Open Days and even the prestigious Armies on Parade. But recently I experienced a hobby competition so utterly absurd that it essentially reset my dumb Warhammer-loving brain back to its default factory settings. Because last month I got invited to Adepticon, and I was flown halfway across the entire globe to try and judge this. Oh my god, what the is that? This is bizarre. I can't even get it all in my shot. There we go. Holy shit. And yeah, I'm making this video today because I totally thought that with all of my previous experience judging painting competitions that I would be totally prepared to judge this competition. And I'm willing to accept now that I was wrong. Very, very wrong. This is Adepticon's Army Showcase competition, and to try and sum up what it is, just try and imagine Games Workshop's sweet innocent Armies on Parade, except there's basically no rules, like none at all. You can build as tall as you like, as wide as you like, as weird as you like, and you can include things which look like they've been dragged backwards through some kind of mad scientist's experimental miniature gaming laboratory. And whilst I've been in the Warhammer and miniature gaming scene for a very long time, I swear that I saw some of the biggest, wildest, and weirdest displays of the hobby that I have ever seen in my entire life. So today I'm gonna blow your minds too and give you a full tour of the competition, including some of its weirdest and wildest entries, but I'll also give you a little bit of a behind the scenes of how something like this is organized, and maybe most importantly for me as a judge, how you even begin to pick a winner when every single entry is like nothing you've ever seen before. Downward swoosh. Wait, it's not working. Whoosh. So to cut a long story short-ish, last month I got to go to Adepticon, the world's biggest Warhammer and wargaming event. I think it's the world's biggest, don't quote me on that one. Held all the way in Milwaukee in the USA. And on top of having an awesome time and getting to hang out and even represent Monument Hobbies, who made my signature paint series at their awesome booth, I also got asked to be one of the judges for the Army Showcase competition. But Louise, what is the Army Showcase competition? Well, I'm so glad you asked. And I'm also glad that you're here to listen to me. Hello. The Adepticon Army Showcase is a display board style hobby competition, kind of like Armies on Parade, but for the teams competing in the various tournaments at Adepticon. And whilst Warhammer usually takes the spotlight as it tends to do, the competition is for every game system present at the tournaments, not just Warhammer. Entries can be anything from Star Wars, Shatterpoint, Historicals, Marvel Crisis Protocol, to Game of Thrones and loads more, making it one of the most diverse hobby competitions that I've ever seen, let alone judged, which is awesome. I love that for me. Yet another twist in the competition is that entire teams can work together on a single entry, and I'm sure if you've ever worked on a display board solo, then you know just how much you would have loved that kind of backup. And let me tell you right now, the sheer unfettered might of an entire group of hyperfixated nerds working together, it's powerful stuff, moving even. But yeah, since the competition is so big and vast and eclectic in its nature, there's a few different categories that you can win in, such as Best Display, Best Skirmish Board for smaller warbands, and of course the biggest prize being Best Overall, which is where us judges come in. But of course, I wasn't going to be judging the competition alone, and I'm probably super biased here, but I think the judging team this year was 10 out of 10 elite, and I've never seen the Avengers, but if I had seen the Avengers, I would probably say something like, the Avengers because we are way cooler. There was me, obviously, bringing the fun and whimsy and the can't shut upness to the whole event, and Eric from Eric's Hobby Workshop, who we love. He's the best guy and is such a great kind of all-rounder of a hobbyist, so absolutely perfect for judging those bigger, larger builds in the competition. Mr. Tooth and Coats himself, Duncan Rhodes, added a little bit of prestige to the event. Dave Taylor, the man who has painted over 10,000 miniatures. And of course, there was my personal favourite judge, sorry Duncan, Victoria Lamb, who I remember back in the day painting some of my absolute favourite Golden Demon winning entries, and now she sculpts her own incredible miniatures, and I was so stoked to meet her at the event and be judging with her, and I had myself a little fangirl moment, which is totally fine. I was so cool. So it was kind of up to the organisers and us as the judges to come up with the different criteria that we would use to judge these wildly different displays, and it turned out that this was the hardest part to nail down in the whole competition, because it turns out that judging something like the Army Showcase or even Armies on Parade is not as straightforward as judging something like a traditional painting competition. In straight up painting competitions like Golden Demon, the concept for judging is simple-ish. The best painted miniature wins, right? But when it comes to judging display boards, what are we actually judging? Is it pure painting skill or jaw-dropping presentation? And more importantly, which do we value over the other? So for example, in this situation, who do you think should win? An ultra clean, kind of simple-ish board, but with beautifully painted miniatures, like top-notch painted miniatures, or a mind-blowing, heavily built-up, incredibly engineered diorama display, which just has kind of okay paint jobs on the miniature. It's tricky, right? After a bunch of back and forth between me and the organisers and also Eric, who was fantastic because he's judged the competition before and he knew exactly what he was looking for, we landed on 5 different criteria which we felt celebrated top-tier paint jobs as well as incredible creativity on the boards in equal measures. The first category we'd use to judge against was creativity, which essentially was coming up with something truly unique we hadn't seen before. Then there was painting quality, which is a classic. Basically, were the miniatures painted to a high standard? Narrative on display was a bit of a funny one, but it covers if the board reflected a story or some of the lore behind the game system it was a part of, because we like to celebrate that. Visual impact or wow factor was one that sounds a little bit vague, but trust me, once you see these builds, you will absolutely understand why this is like a whole category in of itself. And finally, technical execution, which focuses on build quality, plus how well things like lights and moving parts were integrated into the displays as well. Anyways, with all our prepping and scheming out the way, I was fully prepared to enter the thick of it and judge some display boards. Except I wasn't prepared at all, because nothing could have prepared me for what I actually saw when the competition started. The main event is held in the downstairs, I guess, hallway or, I don't know, lobby of the venue, and as soon as I walked in, I was just speechless. And I know a lot of people like throw that phrase around, but I mean it. I was fully shocked. The sheer scale of this competition, I think, is what initially knocked my socks off. Like, I'm used to seeing some pretty cool Warhammer displays, which can get pretty tall, but nothing like this. I managed to catch up with Eric and we decided to do our first judging walk around together. And the first board that we saw was this amazing Age of Sigmar structure, which fortunately I managed to film earlier in the day because you couldn't even get close to it at the event itself. It was fairly popular, to say the least. And yeah, I'm choosing on purpose to say structure here instead of like display board, because this thing was actually taller than I am. And whilst this is obviously instantly impressive because size, the amount of work which went into the armies within it is also just madness. I think from what I remember hearing from the team who made it, every single miniature within the display is converted somehow, and yeah, this thing is just packed with details and hidden features and little Easter eggs and working components and actual feats of impressive structural building and engineering, in my opinion. Entering this at Armies on Parade would probably instantly win you the whole competition, but as we walked around some more, it became apparent that this first very impressive entry was just a good indication on how hard on average people go at this event. Walking around this competition at times felt like a bit of a fever dream because there was kind of this party atmosphere in the crowd, which I think translated over to the boards themselves, or maybe it was the other way around. Let me explain. Unlike with Games Workshop official hobby competitions, which don't allow for like non-IP things to be incorporated into their entries, Army Showcase has no such rule, which means entries can get a little bit wild. There was the aptly named Pink Pony Club display, which was a Chapel Roan themed team whose list was compiled mostly of Mechanicus, Cerberus, and Sidonian riders, which they displayed as the famous pop song, which I can't include here due to copyright reasons, played loudly on repeat. And those guys were right next to these slick looking dudes who had made this absolutely out of this world, like chaos themed rock concert board, which had 4 themed areas for each of their armies with full LED warp portals which surrounded this super deep podium in the middle to display all of their chaos champions, of course, rocking out on individual instruments of music and assumably torture. At one point, me and Eric even found ourselves adorned in Mardi Gras beads, eating questionable bagged sweets, and dancing to terrible 90s music as we attempted to judge this massive multi-table spanning Chaos God Tiki party themed board where I legitimately think they were just having a party, and we totally joined in with them as well because being a judge ain't so bad sometimes. One of my absolute favorite boards though that I can't stop thinking about even now was this complete nightmare fuel Age of Sigmar kids television display piece built inside of a real TV, which also pumped out the soundtracks to your favorite childhood shows as you walked past. And of course, the armies inside were all themed appropriately with Sesame Street, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Barney the Dinosaur, of course being Seraphon, and these hollowed out, freaky ass Teletubby gargants. Like, I couldn't look away. It was so fantastically awful to look at, and I love them so much. But along with the very unserious but admittedly very impressive entries that we saw just now, there were also teams who took things like the IP and the source materials that they were drawing from a little bit more seriously, but then amped the whole thing up to 11. One display which immediately caught all of the judges' attention was this large-scale Necron diorama, which just seems to perfectly encapsulate both individual miniature painting skill and crafting ability too. There were also some incredible feats of engineering in here as well, because this thing fully lit up with these purpley pink pulsating LED lights, and it even had these little hidden panel-y doors at the back so you could peek a little alternative angle, and it was just so cool. I spent ages just studying this piece alone. Some of me and Eric's favourites especially were some of the incredibly made boards which came under the skirmish category, which essentially just means they displayed a smaller warband as opposed to an entire army. This fully rotating Marvel Crisis Protocol one was absolutely incredible, and the lovely people who made it even made this little comic book detailing each of the characters and who painted them, and all sorts of other information too, which I absolutely loved. The attention to detail these guys put in both on the board and aside of the board was just 10 out of 10. One of my personal favourite boards in the whole competition, however, was an interesting one because it actually didn't include any form of like display board at all, and it won my heart purely on just how hard the painting went. What you're seeing here is the largest and definitely also the best painted epic Warhammer army I have ever seen in my life. And of course, I'm a little bit biased here because I love Titanicus and I spent a lot of time working on it when I was in the specialist design studio, but the sheer work and dedication which must have gone into building and painting this army is absolutely mind-boggling. The larger scale Titans are impressive enough, but the real thing which made me go, oh yeah, this is something so special, is when you realize that every single tiny Space Marine has been painted with the same love and care as the bigger miniatures. They have freehanding, weathering, highlighting, and decals applied to every single guy. And to jump the gun a little bit, I gave this guy my Judge's Choice Award because he definitely deserved it, and I was fully delighted to see this army, and I hope that you're all just as impressed as I was watching this now, because I love this so much. This is what it's all about. But before we move on to the judging itself, I want to show you guys one more board which had us all confused, impressed, and wondering, how does one sneak an entire blood god and an entire river of blood into a pretty normal convention center, and why? Why? This bonkers Khorne display board absolutely dominated the room, with a to scale with the miniatures fully kitted out Khorne sitting atop his skull throne, which loomed over the rest of the board and all of the participants of the event around 10 foot off the ground, making me feel like maybe I was the one being judged. Kind of uneasy. And if that wasn't cool enough, then surrounding the board and the impressive 40k Khorne army within it was a fully functioning river of blood. Well, not actual blood, it looked kind of like delicious cherryade, and it's making me a little thirsty watching it right now. But yeah, the river of blood was spookily illuminated and it actually flowed around the entire board, and trust me, everyone was so into this display, and I have personally never seen anything like it either. And yeah, I told you guys that this was the most insane hobby competition I'd ever judged, and I was not lying, not for a second. But unfortunately, now it was time for us judges to stop having so much fun and actually put our heads together to decide on some winners, and trust me, it was not easy at all. But eventually, after much deliberation, and with each of us putting in our unique hobby knowledge into the works, we finally decided all together who our big winners were gonna be. In first place, receiving both the People's Choice as voted by the attendees and the Judge's Choice as well, which means we must have done something right, was the huge Age of Sigmar display board, which to us seemed like a very easy top winner because it was just so impressive. The runner-up was a trickier one to pick, but eventually we went with the glowy Necron diorama board because both the quality of the paint jobs and the engineering which went into it, as well as the overall moody atmosphere, were just wonderful. The Best Skirmish Award went to this awesome and maybe understated little Gene Stealer kill team display. And whilst it doesn't have a huge amount of bells and whistles on it like some of the other displays did, the execution of everything was absolutely flawless, and the individual quality of each of the painted miniatures in this display really pushed it to the front of our minds whilst we were judging it. And of course, the Best Display Award went to the intimidatingly massive Khorne board, which I think blew everyone's socks off, and beyond the miniatures being well executed too, excuse the pun, we couldn't ignore that it definitely had that wow factor that the judges were looking for in absolute spades. And with that, everyone got their awards, had a big old hug and a celebration in the hallway of the convention center, and the competition was over. And I have to say that not only was this like the weirdest hobby competition I've ever judged, but it was also maybe the most fun as well. In fact, no, it was definitely the most fun I have ever had at any kind of hobby competition. There, I said it. Competitions like Armies on Parade and Golden Demon are fun because miniature painting is fun, and entering a miniature painting competition or a hobby competition should also just be an enjoyable experience for everyone involved. But also, these competitions are a little bit more serious, with rules, limitations, and of course, official backing from Games Workshop themselves, which can make them feel like they're a bit more structured and maybe even more rewarding for your average Warhammer fan. But what I saw at the Adepticon Army Showcase I think demonstrates how much fun these hobby competitions can be when the attendees are just allowed to completely cut loose with their creativity without limitations. No conversion or kit bash is too illegal, no paint job is deemed too much, no blood river is too delicious looking, and no idea that you have is too silly to be in at a shot of winning, and more importantly, just delighting everyone at the event. And this time last year, I went to the Age of Sigmar World's Team Championship, which again is not a Games Workshop official event, but when I was there, I saw the same sort of party atmosphere and general friendly camaraderie that I saw at this event too. So sure, I still love Golden Demon, and the award show was really nice and everyone was super happy for the winners, and Armies on Parade I still think is one of the best competitions Games Workshop holds, and entering it is really rewarding. But if you want to cut loose with your friends, unleash your imaginations, and really just go wild with your creativity and skills outside of what is just considered Games Workshop approved, then it's good to know that there's other events, competitions, and communities out there who will celebrate all of the weird and wonderful ways that you choose to love your own hobby. But I am afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye 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 bye. Bye bye.